one of our Frontier lecture series. Our speaker today is Francis Quek, like Ducky says. He's a professor of computer science at Virginia Tech. He directs the Vision Interfaces and Systems Laboratory. He's a fairly prolific scholar. I looked up on his website. In 2010, he only had 16 scholarly products. He kind of fell off in 2011, has only 4 listed. But 2012, he has 17, and this year he's on a good pace. He's got already 13 scholarly products listed, so he's very prolific at that. He performs research in the human-computer interaction with a focus on awareness and embodied interaction. He's going to talk about an embodied perspective on technology today. He recently received the Virginia Tech 2012 Excalibur Teaching Award. And it says that's for an excellence of an individual involved in teaching with technology. And it was given in recognition of his contributions to technology-assisted learning and physical computing for computer scientists, a class for graduate students with considerable knowledge and expertise in broad areas of computing. And as I read this, what he does is he helps students develop joint projects and individual projects, and works. It sounds like it's a laboratory skunkworks type of activity that you do with them, that they develop these things.
It's almost like a maker space.
Okay. So some of the things that he research includes agent-based video analysis of body, head, and hand movements. And I believe we'll probably see something about that today. Mathematics learning in children using tangible media like tangrams. Spatial reading for individuals who are blind or vision impaired using multimedia and touch capabilities of iPad with tactile enhancements. And how handheld devices, computers, services, and environmental displays function in technology ecologies, especially support learning. So this talk today is learning with technology in an embodied perspective. I'd like you to welcome Francis Quek.
It's a pleasure and honor to be here in our Practice and Learning Lecture Series. Learning with technology and embodied perspective. I'm going to begin by introducing the idea that human language itself is an embodied process, and that this idea informs us into a theory of embodied cognition that takes us beyond the body into mind. I shall then present a set of projects that are informed by this perspective, and they all have to do with cyber learning, how to help people learn better, be more effective, to think more broadly, to understand more deeply, to be able to access information more readily. So, embodiment and language. See if you can understand what these two people are saying. This is from real data from a data sets.
You know, like this. Well, if we're trying to drive them out here, we need to put them up here. Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is we should make it a line through the rooms so that they explode, like here, then here, then.
If you didn't get that, that's okay. Very few people can. How about this?
You know, like this. Well, if we're trying to drive them out here, we need to put them up here. Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is we should make it a line through the rooms so that they explode, like here, then here, then.
You may not know the context, but suddenly everything makes sense, doesn't it? Body and speech combine to tell you what these two people are speaking, not only individually, but corporately. They are constructing imagery. And if I were to ask you, what did they say? You might be able to tell me they were talking about putting things in a line. And if I ask you, did they say it or did they gesture it? 5 minutes later, you couldn't tell me. You receive the language as a holistic piece. You comprehend. But how does this work? These two people think about what they're going to say and then think about what gestures they're going to perform to annotate it. Like graduate students thinking about writing the paper, and then the professor says, I need a graphic, I'll stick one there, see figure 5. Why figure 5? I don't know. Here's the idea. In the back of our mind, we are generating mental imagery. I don't mean pictures. I mean spatial temporal bundles of activation. We know that these activations travel from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. We know that it goes to the Wernicke's area from facial studies. We know that it goes to the Broca's area, what is known as the speech center, and then it bursts forth as speech. Now listen to my voice. It is all modal. My lips are moving. My tongue is moving. My jaw is moving. My larynx is shaking and shifting for the next phrase. Even my respiratory system, my lungs are brought into the process of speaking so I don't run out of air before I finish a sentence. How do we plan all that? How does all that work? If I find out, send a Nobel Prize. We are fearful and wonderful. And then we have our hands. And the idea here is this. The imagery that I'm talking about here is an embodied imagery. And this embodied imagery reveals itself through our bodily movements. We gesture not only for our competitor, we gesture also for ourselves, to situate thought, to organize space. It's been said that we gesture on the phone. So here's the idea that this embodied imagery can be assessed, observed, and processed, and that's where the computer science folks get in, and analyzed to understand the underlying units of thought from which the language is constructed in the first place. I'm going to give you there are all kinds of motion vectors that you can ignore them. Okay, that's how we process the data. But listen to what she's saying. We're going to analyze a bit of this.
So you're in the kitchen, and then there's the back stairs. Oh, I forgot to say, when you enter the house from the front, and you open the doors with the glass in them, there's the front staircase runs right up there on your left. So you can go straight upstairs to the second floor from there if you want. But if you come around through the kitchen into the back, there's a back staircase that winds around like this and puts you up on the second floor.
Now, from our processing, this is what we get. This is the movement of the hands left and right in the horizontal direction. You can see this nice to open the doors gesture right here. This is the vertical position of the hand. Here, these are the voice envelopes, the power of the larynx. Okay. And I've put under here the speech. The thing's a little out of focus, but that's okay. Maybe the glasses are focused. But and over here, you see some of the gesture features that we expected. For this particular speaker, she has placed the back of the house on her right hand. So the right staircase, the kitchen is on right hand. When she's talking about the center of the house and the frontage, two hands in operation. And when two hands are in operation, there's always some kind of symmetry that can be extracted. Either lateral symmetry, a vertical symmetry, or a proximal distal symmetry. In fact, the only way you can break symmetry is to have a platform hand and moving hand. Or if you assign the other hand to doing something else, like drinking coffee, then you can disengage. Otherwise, there's a tyranny of symmetry that takes place.
For a moment, I thought she was using sign language along with talking.
No.
No, I know, but
She's
first,
describing space.
yeah, yeah.
If I would ask you to describe your home, you would begin gesturing. Gesture and space come together extremely. If I would ask you, how do you get from here to the airport, and you begin gesturing, and there, I can talk about that. I spent many years studying gestures, right? Now, when she goes to the front staircase, you see these nice big oscillatory gestures? The front staircase that runs right up there on the left takes you up to the second floor. Over here, the right hand comes back again to talk about the back of the house. See this part? This little squiggle here? This squiggle here is the same as this squiggle here, except a little larger. She knew that she's going to trouble here, and the gesture was a little smaller before she says, oh, I forgot to say. So you can see a lot from here. I'm just going to point out two things in this video that is kind of interesting. One, look at these two motion traces here. Both hands are going downwards. But interestingly, one hand was going to rest, the right hand was going to rest, and the left hand was moving up to talk about the front staircase. We know from psycholinguistics that gestures have multiple phases. There's a final phase known as a retraction, and that's what's happening here. A retraction says that the previous linguistic piece has ended, and the next one has already begun. So, and this thing takes place in the highly disfluent section, the doors with the glass in them. She's thinking while speaking. But notice this. There's the front staircase runs right up there like this. The front staircase marks a linguistic unit. Talking about the front staircase would be lost. There's no way to parse this without looking at gestures. Okay, I'll show you another one that's very interesting. Over here, okay, we already said that the left hand is going to rest and right hand is going to go do a semantic work of describing the back staircase, right? But notice that this restriction does not go completely to rest. This hand stays up here. Right up there, from there. Here, there's a back staircase that runs around like this that takes you to the second floor from there. What was she doing? She had already had in her mind the plan to go upstairs before she even began talking about the back staircase. That was the discourse plan. You can actually access a lot of information. We have actually used this to study how children learn and what they are thinking about when they are learning. Because the gestural record tells you what the units of construction of thought are from which the language flows. So what can we say from this? There's a lot more here. Entire journal papers that come out of this analysis. Embodiment shapes language. The laterality of our body. The symmetry of our form. The opportunity to use space to situate thinking and hold thought. The structure of oscillatory processes. All this reveal mental imagery. The key point here is this. I've synthesized a whole body of work in a small example here. Embodied cognition to me is the mind appropriating processes of body for higher thinking, for mathematics, for language, for talk, for learning. I'll show you an example here of how those ideas have been brought into the process of distance learning. A number of years back, the Navy came to me and said, we have got midshipmen aboard ship and we want to teach them, we want to tutor them in electrical engineering. But our tutors cannot be flown onto the ship every day. Right? In the army, you can bring them all to a base and teach them arithmetic or mathematics or GED. But on ships, everybody needs to know some electrical engineering. So we designed a system where a tutor can be in her own space, talking and gesturing into a pen tablet, and the student is on board ship, interacting with her avatar on the screen, and the entire interaction is controlled only from the tip of her pen and the voice. Let's see how this works. I'm going to put the electrical engineers on show here. This is the basic unit of computer memory, it's SR2000. If I were to say the pulse comes to the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high, where would you put the vocal emphasis or the gestural emphasis? And the answer is it depends. If I was to teach a class on the structure of this circuit, and I would say this circuit has 4 transistors, two trigger and 2 drive transistors, and the pulse comes to the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high. Right? The opposition is Q3, Q1, trigger and drive. If I were to talk about this thing in terms of the VLSI construction of these things, in terms of the junctions, the base and the collector junctions, I might say, when the pulse comes in, the pulse comes to the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high. My vocal stress is on base and collector this time. If I were teaching this as switching theory, I might say, and the pulse comes to the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high. And when it goes high, something else happens. You see, where you put your vocal emphasis and your gesture actually changes the very meaning of what you're trying to say. There's a theory behind this. Language proceeds from pulse to pulse, the rhyme and the theme, each one building on the other, and the gesture and the speech focus falls on the most semantically important piece at each unfolding of your thinking. You gesture wrong, you teach wrong. That's another idea here. And that package of gesture speech synchrony is so tight in our mind, we generated from seed, that you can actually gesture into one space and reconstruct it in another. I'll show you how this works. Now, to make this work, there's AI, matching and so on. There's speech processing. There's networking. There's animation and graphics. But she's going to gesture, showing you the Q3, Q1 acquisition.
And the pulse comes into the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high.
A little overemphasized. She's a student after all. Here's the avatar.
And the pulse comes into the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high.
This is the camera at the side, observing the student so that the avatar knows how to make eye contact and turn back and provide natural behavior. Here's another one, the base collector apposition.
The pulse comes into the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1
You know
go high.
it's your job. Okay. Avatar.
The pulse comes into the base of Q3, making the collector of Q1 go high.
Okay. So we can build systems like this entire thing was driven digitally. Okay. Using only the pen hits that we interpret. So what have we done here? Our system allows tutors to interact with the system transparently. They simply point, they're not thinking about pointing. They are talking and pointing naturally. Okay? There's no extra cognitive load. The students are able to get temporally and spatially situated information. The avatar helps to reduce the cognitive load of having otherwise to follow a flying cursor. And ultimately, this system demonstrates the importance of gesture speech coherence at the level of meaning. So you can build systems like this and use them for distance tutoring, where you need spatial temporal coherence. This takes us to our next project. I call that the utterly embodied. I can explain why I call it utterly embodied elsewhere. But it's about special education, math instruction for the blind. In mathematics discourse, instructional discourse, at least 3 kinds of information is exchanged. First, there's a speech. Secondly, there's a graphic that carries the information that is being conveyed, like this graphic on the screen. And finally, there's situating information in the form of co-temporal gesture and axis, as you saw just now, that helps you know where in the figure to look to make sense of what's being said. Individuals who are blind and severely visually impaired, IDSBI, have access to the first, they are blind, not deaf. They have access to the second. Every school now can generate embossed baseline drawings. I mean, it's a requirement by the ADA. Okay. But normally nobody thinks about situating gestures. So we started research on this to help in the inclusive education of blind students in classrooms. So this is what we did. By the way, this paper is going to come out in Tokai, the flagship journal of HCI, in this issue. We have a built-in camera in the iMac here, looking at the teacher as he points. So if the camera is there and I point, it knows where I'm pointing. Okay. The blind student here is an inclusive classroom with sighted students. She has a downward-looking camera looking at her hand as she's reading the raised line drawing. With that, we can provide a two-way embodiment awareness. The teacher has got in the iMac screen a heads-up display of where the student is pointing and reading, the blue dot. The blind student has a glove on her hand that vibrates and tells her where the teacher is pointing so she can follow. Okay. It's to assist this classroom interaction and communication. To do this, we have engaged in a long process that didn't exist such a glove. We didn't even know how to build one of these things, what the perception requirements are. A whole year of multiple prototyping design, testing, what you call the perception action tests to determine whether this thing works. At the end of the 1 year, we had a system that we knew could give direction. The blind student could follow where the glove was going. We also knew that it did not interfere with reading, that you could read with the fingertips as the glove vibrated. We also knew that you could listen to a story while the glove is vibrating, you're reading with the fingertip, and you can process all these 3 pieces of information. It doesn't give you information overload. Those are things you worry about when you build a system like this, right? And then we took this thing, we built the rest of the system, the iMac tracking and all that, and we constructed an interaction environment where you have a sighted person and the blind student interacting over solving a puzzle. It failed. More than 30% of the discourse turns were dedicated to either the technology or to the act of pointing itself. It was getting in the way. If you took this thing in an inclusive classroom, it wouldn't work. We judged that this system failed because the requirements for discourse maintenance require such a high level of cognitive capability that it was overwhelming the student. The process of using the glove had to get to the point where it became automatic or embodied. It had to be embodied skill. So what we did was we built a computer game. And we were in in Virginia Tech, we drove back to Wright State where the blind students were, and we installed this in the Center for Disabilities Assistance, and the students could use this at their leisure for a whole semester. The students exhibited all the typical characteristics of undergrads with computer games. They played with it. They tried to get a high score. They competed with one another on this thing. One of them tried to buy the game from us. But at the end of this thing, everybody got through all 3 levels of the game. We used Csikszentmihalyi's game design theories and all that to do this level of challenge, engagement, and so on, because we need to keep them engaged and interested. At the end of this, the system, they were playing the game really proficiently. We took the system back into a discourse test at the end of game training skill. And this time, they solved the puzzle 3 times faster. There was not a single discourse turn dedicated to technology or the act of pointing. All the talk was about solving the puzzle and playful banter that you would have between 2 people playing a game. They were normal. And we said, yes, we got it. So we are ready to take this thing into an inclusive math classroom. What we did was that we designed 2 math curricula, one around Aristoteles' method of measuring the radius of the Earth, and the other on trigonometry. Our students were all matched for pre-algebra ability. Very few blind students actually get to algebra. And we can talk about why. I think this is some of the reasons why. We counterbalanced our blind students into inclusive learning environments, and we tested with and without the system. We derived 2 methods to measure, to assess whether the students had the opportunity to learn. The first was based upon David McNeil's theory of the growth point, to see whether or not the blind student would inhabit the same growth point of thinking. Basically, it tells you whether they are in the same semantic piece of information at the same time. The second analysis we made use of was Herb Clark. He's a psycholinguist, social psychologist at Stanford. David McNeil is a close friend of mine at Chicago. Okay. And we used the presentation acceptance model to see whether common ground was achieved between the teacher and the student. And in both cases, we ascertained that if the teacher had the appropriate communication skill, that this common ground and growth point sharing could be achieved. Now, this is the real video.
Okay.
You're welcome. This real video, this is the teacher pointing, blind student reading, the overview video. This is how we code the data. We built this system ourselves. Here we go.
This angle T right here
She's following.
is equivalent to the angle T right here in the middle by way of transversal.
Okay, here's one without the HDS. You'll see her trying her best to follow, and eventually she gives up.
Horizontal line meeting radius 2. And so then radius 2 is our transversal.
Will that work?
And you notice inside, that's what, when a transversal crosses a parallel line, or 2 parallel lines,
She gives up, puts her head on her hand and goes to sleep. This happens every day in our schools. The Inclusive Education Act requires inclusive education like this. But teachers are every day faced with the Faustian choice of either keeping up with the SOLs and leaving the blind student behind like this, or slowing down and paying inordinate action to the blind student, making her feel singled out, and making the class run too slow. So what have we seen? You will see this as the hallmark of my work, is heavy collaboration across HCI, CS, psycholinguistics, special education in this case. We demonstrated the importance of Cheshire uptake. We developed a technique to assess. We often have to do this because we are trying to analyze techniques that nobody has analyzed before. To assess the opportunity to learn, and eventually we ascertained that all parties gain from this. The IBSBI obviously had unprecedented access to the information, and the details singled out, with teachers come up and hold their hand and tell them where to read. The sighted students actually found that the pace of class and instruction improved. The teacher actually had to slow down to wait for the blind student to arrive at the point, and that added a wait time. Wait time is important for learning. And it actually improved the teaching in the class. The instructor of the classroom felt that he had access and awareness of what the blind student is doing so that he can pace the class better without having to guess. And without having to ask, are you there yet? He knew. That's how the blind student said that this is scary because never before could people know their attention. And now somebody can assess their attention just as I'm assessing, Lin nodding his head over there. Okay. Second project, e-readers for the blind. I shall begin with the premise that books and pages are information designed for embodied beings endowed with sight. This article is about Jasmine Lee, champion Rubik's Cube player of Australia. As you read this article, if I were to ask you who is this article about, it's Jasmine Lee over there. Who wrote this article is Sean Mayer, down there. If I were to ask you what's an algorithm, she used an algorithm, that's what's an algorithm, it's right there. This entire document is written and organized in such a way that it aids the sighted person for visual access, reaccess, comprehension, and keeping place. Walter Ong, in his very influential book, Orality and Literacy, the Technologizing of the Word, he is one of the big saints of communication studies. Okay. He tells us that in pre-literate days, before the invention of printing, all writing was designed for oral consumption. And the very structure of writing itself, information itself, bore the markings to help people maintain place and keep context. Alliteration, rhyme, structure. All these provided mnemonic aids for reading and comprehension. With printing, all that changed. And spatial organization became the coin of the realm, so that information is so imbued with space that we could not possibly separate them. There is no such thing as a rhyming textbook. I haven't seen one. Okay. And we know that reading is important. Modern reading studies tell us that spatial reading is extremely important for active reading, skimming, and so on. Right? Reading strategies. What of the blind? Well, for the blind, Braille, invented in 1824, is still the state of the art. But unfortunately, Braille literacy in America is now at 10%. We can talk about why. Inclusive education has a part to do with it. On top of that, Braille is not the most portable of things. Harry Potter, the Order of the Phoenix, is listed at 870 pages for the sighted. It is 11 volumes of 2-inch thick, 11-inch by 14-inch thick cardstock paper for the blind, running 2 foot tall as a stack. In a day where portability of information is a part of our thinking and learning, that's unacceptable. The alternative is audio readers like this Victor reader here that has been approved by the VA for support. But the problem with these things is that all information is carried by the ephemeral vibrations of molecules in the air that disappears the moment it ends, leaving the blind person with the task of keeping place and maintaining the context and meaning all throughout. You cannot read 5 paragraphs and say, who the hell is Lin Bilbao? Right? And a sighted person reads back 5 paragraphs and say, oh yeah, there it is. In fact, writing expects you to be able to do that. We no longer rhyme it so that you know exactly what it's about. And the blind student doesn't have that. Visually dominant technology like the iPads that we have here threatens to widen the gap between the sighted and the blind. So how can we help? We built a system. This is an embossed overlay that's put on top of the iPad. When the words are touched, they are read. So the blind student is now able to fuse the spatial landmarking of the grid with the text as it is read. Okay. To support self-paced active reading, but the devil's in the details. I'll not go through the details of building of this thing, but a lot of technology went into it. And it is a multi-year project. Okay, devil's in the detail of everything. I'll just show you one. But here's how the system works.
Derek was an apprentice to the Machinist Guild.
So this has improved a lot since the last time I was here. This is a newer system. Thanks to Ricardo for helping with some of the audio work, thinking on how to do this. Okay, we started the collaboration there already. This student has seen this system for the first time. With practice, they will go much faster. Okay, right. So we went through a series of design, same thing as before. We worked with IBSBI consultants to help understand how this thing should work and what the features are. Even the overlay and the dimensions and so on had to be studied and proved. We took this to a pool of IBSBI and tested it, and finally we were ready to do a 2-week experience sample method study in the homes of the blind people. We gave each one 21 articles to read in 2 weeks. 3 of the 7 participants we had finished reading all the articles in less than a week and asked for more. Okay. Everything improved. We now had a system that was able to support reading and comprehension. Comprehension scores were all very good. But we uncovered one final problem, and that is the line straying problem. Because the if the person is completely blind, even the line marking grid, you do not know that you may be in between lines. So you could actually be reading this, go to the next line, and come back and get completely confused. So we had to add one more innovation to this thing, and we call this intelligent reading support. We created something we call the sonic gutter. It's actually a sound fence, dynamically adjusting. We estimate where the blind person is reading, and then we put a fence around it so that when you stray into this spaces, you hear static noise even while the system is reading, so that you can self-correct. To further help, we designed an intelligent reading support system that's a probabilistic model. We estimate based upon the history, a Markov model, where the student is reading next. Okay, so that even if the student had moved the finger up here, or down here, we continue reading these words going forward if we know that they are reading this line. In essence, what we do is we flatten the line for the reading dynamically. Okay. And the static sound and all that's still in place to lead them back. If they really want to move, they lift the finger and touch again, then they are reset. Okay. So we took this thing into our final study. Student just defended last week, before last. Okay. The goals are to evaluate effectiveness, ability to answer questions, efficiency, speed of reading and refining, spatial perception of the page. We did a 2x2 study with overlay and active reading support. We worked with IBSBI. Unfortunately, in Appalachia, population is quite wide, 11 to 18 years old, 77. Okay, but still suffice to get the results. Data was collected in experimental video and post-experiment questionnaires. We showed that in all 3 measures, the overlay plus the intelligent active reading support was a minimal effective system. By this we mean that if we compare this against the base system, we achieve significant advantage. But if you remove any one feature, we fail. So if you had to pick this thing, if Amazon wants to embed this thing into Kindle, we can tell them what the technology is needed for running this thing at a minimal level. That's important. And for page structure, the readers adopted different strategies, the same way sighted people do, to understand the page structure, either by looking for white space, looking for short lines that end of paragraphs, and some of them did it semantically, an oral strategy. Results. Reading is not the same as interaction. Apple's, what you call this now, Android's talk back, what does Apple have? VoiceOver, okay? Do not work if you go word by word, because they treat every single word as a button. And it is very, very choppy reading, and as hand and pack, it does not work at all. Our stepwise incremental approach allowed us to determine the minimum effective design. The details of design choices and implementation are critical to the success of the system. And finally, we ascertained that the system provided spatial access to the page and enabled self-paced reading comprehension, refining, and page structure comprehension. So, and that resulted in the thesis. Next step up is note-taking in place. Our next major theme that we have in the way I divided my work for this time is physicality. The physicality of objects to help us understand and learn. Thinking and device ecologies. Ever since iPad was introduced just 3 years ago, by the way, 2010, there have been all kinds of wild interest in the use of this thing in classrooms, largely because they bear the same form factor as books. But if you think about it, the iPad is only the last along a line of many innovations that could be useful for learning. The question we have is, how can the iPad help us learn other than being a machine all by itself? Can they function in ecology to help us learn? And to think about that, I bring us to a paper ecology. This entire university enterprise is based on paper, invented and printing, invented 500 years ago. But nobody would imagine trying to get a student to learn with a single sheet of paper or with even a single book. The entire ecology is there to support our thinking, and we appropriate these pieces opportunistically for learning. It's not a single piece. So why should we have to learn singly from a single device? So we have to take an information-centric view, not a technology-centered one. We want to think of devices not as so many leather straws or what I call portal thinking, to draw information to us just to read. How may you make information real? And how may this impact thinking and learning? Is a question we are asking in this piece of work. So, we need a theory for this. We go to Vygotsky's sign mediation theory, and most of you know this, who is in education. Basically, if a student were to learn about convolution, she would have a thought object, the very hairy equation of convolution, and she may be able to understand it. But if she had to remember every single piece of this thing to advance in education, that will make learning untenable. So what she does is this. The human uses language as a means, as a tool for thinking. Right? That's Vygotsky's tremendous input. She thinks of it as sign convolution. And from that point on, she can think about convolution as A convolved with B, and then she can continue, advancing in education, and being able to unpack the information whenever she needs to, but being able to have a handle to this to think. Right? And Vygotsky has a second idea that is less known, and that is the material carrier. He says that we appropriate gesture, space, a knot and handkerchief, a block of wood, his double stimulation approach, to help us think, thereby bringing the external world into the loop of thinking. I'll give you an example. If I have to solve the arithmetic problem, I might say 9 plus 6 plus 4, that is 22. Put 2 up there, put 2 down there. 5 plus 6, 11 plus 4, 15. Add the 2, 17 plus the 2 beneath. What did I just do? With you together in the room, I have constructed the space. I've used the 2 up there and the 2 down there to hold the thing in place. We extended my thinking beyond that, which is simply biological. And it brings perception into the loop of thinking. That's what this thing does. But Vygotsky never imagined computation. Today, we can encode with objects, thought objects, into digital objects. I mean, the textbook that she read, from which she learned convolution, could be there, always available to her, right? Whenever she needs to re-reference. Furthermore, technology allows us to manifest any object, any information in space. I call this manifest objects. Yeah, just display. I can put this thing up. If I have a large enough screen and enough screen real estate, I can put this thing up as a poster board permanently, if I want to. So I could have these things called what I call manifest objects. The question is whether or not the manifest object on the attractive display can become a psychological tool for thinking in material carrier. So that's what we're going to do. We want through a process of objectification to merge those two. And the question is, does this happen? And what kind of technology can we put together to help this happen? Because if you do that, you can actually extend thinking and learning beyond empty blocks and space. So to do this, we did a knowledge discovery study. We seeded a class of 12 graduate students learning about physical computing. This is the class that I got the award for, actually. With an iPod Touch, an iPad, a 27-inch custom IMAX screen that's touch capable, and large screen displays in our center. We gave them this open-ended task to discover in the literature what people are saying about physical computing and to create taxonomy for this and write a report. The data was interviews and videos of group meetings, and to understand this, we actually devised a new approach for analysis. We call that digital object path analysis. What we mean is this: we look for learning episodes, and then we track pieces of information that's used to help learning. And as the information moves from one device to another device, from one space in another space, we determine how this is being transformed from one space to another, and how this transformation may help or hinder the learning of this piece of information, or the exchange of the information. Here's an example. Matt is in a foraging and writing exercise. He begins by working with his friends on a whiteboard, looking for a set of keywords that might be useful. He goes forth into his own little space and uses a larger screen connected to his laptop and searches for these papers. Interestingly, he does not save the papers away. There are just too many of them. He leaves them in tabs in his browser. if the browser crashes, he loses all his work, by the way. Okay? He leaves it on the browser, and I think you all can relate to doing that yourselves. He takes this thing to his team meeting and basically just uses this as pieces of information to share with one another, sometimes with a large screen, sometimes they just turn the laptop around and show it to one another. Once they determine what the more relevant papers were, he commits this thing to his hard drive, naming the file and putting them in some kind of logical order. He then puts this thing onto Dropbox. Now you're taking the cloud into the space. And then he's able to use Goodreader, those of you who read on the iPad knows about this, to read the PDF documents. Once he has done this and internalized enough of the information, he uses the iPad as objective reference and writes his paper. What we see here is a process of incremental cognitive commitment to this piece of information. Very similar to Frank Shipman's idea of what you call this now, deferred commitment to order, to structure. But except this is at the cognitive level. Merleau-Ponty talks about intentional regard, shedding intentional regard to information and to things in our world. Okay. So this is the kind of things that we observe. Now, we also observe the use of this thing in an objective sense, referring to it as external objects to support our thinking. So our findings are this. I'm not going to go through all of them. Immediacy, concreteness, iconicity, common ground, expectation of interaction, that you need to be able to build all these features into the system to help with the use of thinking. I'll just give you two examples. The first is immediacy. If Matt were to find a paper about subject X and were to hand it to John as a document, here John, this is about X. He takes it from me, he goes and reads it, he has an understanding this is about X. It's a proxy for X for him. It also becomes a psychological tool. But if I were to say to John, I found a paper about X, I'll put it in my Dropbox and you can get it from this URL, and he goes from things about it, the context is lost, and the immediacy has been fractured. Okay. So we wanted to allow people to be able to do this with information in a stable space. And we put together a system that uses web technology to do this. When Matt finds a document, he can take it and flick it onto a shared tabletop where he's working with John. John can then simply go there and pick up the object and put it onto his laptop, like putting it on your folder and go away and then put it on your laptop. So that the physicality of the object is maintained as they move through this space. We see this kind of interaction as being very important and necessary for interaction. Here's another one. We built a note card table, this one. This table has 18 megapixels, so the visualization folks will like this. Okay, all right. We did this in a history class where the students were making sense of a period of history, 1607, Jamestown, early American history. There was a lot of notes in note cards. You'll see some of this. And the ecology in this case involved the tabletop and the handheld that was tracked so that you can use this thing to edit. It became the proxy for the note card. You can pick it up, edit it, move it around, drop it, because the whole thing is tracked in the space. We ascertained that the joint space was important to support common ground establishment. Oh, it's lunchtime. Sorry. Okay. And the team established protocols to establish common ground in the way her talked about common ground. And one of these, you will see this, it's called we call this the announcement and gathering protocol. We do a lot of micro-analysis of this course to understand what's going on in the classroom. Okay.
What is that 50 papers? That's 50 papers. No, these are all supposed to be 1607s.
Notice how everybody suddenly gathers. This happens over and over again. What happened here is that he is foraging over here, and they are discussing some aspect of the history. And they're all doing their own things. The timeline, shared timeline that they were constructing is over here. After foraging, he grabs an object, he brings it back to the timeline and says, this is all supposedly about 1607, announcement. He didn't say, everybody come and look at this. He just simply talks about what he's going to do to this timeline. Suddenly convocation takes place. They begin discussing, and they have another protocol, which is the proposition ratification protocol. And we found that they were doing this establishing protocols for the community of action that was taking place. And all this came about because of this shared focus that's permitted by this persistent display that held the information. So, what have we done? This is a piece of work, a different kind of work than the one before, where we analyze behavior to understand the set of principles that will inform the use and design of technology for learning spaces. The approach is grounded in theory, because it's sign mediation theory, because otherwise we have no way to analyze this thing. Okay? We developed an evaluation approach, the digital object path analysis, to help us to understand how different technologies support the use of information as it transitions from place to place. We also have developed a framework that can involve computer science in building the middleware of the space for interaction, architecture about spaces for learning, and library sciences about, the libraries today are no longer about the repositories of books, they are taking places. Okay. So, you can instigate a lot of collaboration with a piece of work like this. We come now to 10 tab. Okay. This is about physical and virtual manipulation of objects. This was not presented my last time here. In a previous study, with manipulatives, these are 10 grams, and this is a virtual 10 gram, where we divided students working with 10 grams, physical and virtual 10 grams individually in trials. We made a certain set of observations through this cost analysis again. Here are the results. When you use physical manipulatives, the focus is on problem solving. There were a lot of epistemic strategies of arranging, flipping, testing, to understand the underlying information about their geometry. But there was very little discussion about geometric concepts. You just take the object and place it very intuitively. You rotate it, and that's what it is. When you work with it in the virtual space, there was a lot more discussion around geometric concepts, because you need the geometry even to interact. You need to rotate, you need to translate. You need to know that this thing is a triangle and therefore has a point of rotation. Right? And so there was a lot more discussion, exchange of geometric concepts. And for problem solving, however, the child has to reorganize the conceptual thinking out of the frame in interaction. So there was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot less epistemic approach strategies of learning about shape. They solve problems poorer, basically. They do not learn how to solve problems as well. In terms of social interaction, over here there was less social interaction. All the interaction was mediated through the movement of the objects. You see me flipping the object, so you dive down and tell you why I did it. Whereas, because there's a single mouse wielder over here, the other student will say, no, take that, turn it more. You know, move it. No, I mean a triangle, not a square. So the question is, how do you bridge between the two worlds? How do you have the advantage of the physical manipulatives for problem solving, support, and thinking, and the virtual manipulatives for formal arithmetic parametric learning? This is a project that we have funded by the National Science Foundation again. We want a system where you can transition between physical manipulatives to virtual interaction graphically through parametric interaction. Furthermore, we want to manipulate social interaction across 3 levels. Over here, the free interaction is kind of like the 10 grams. Everybody can grab anything they want, whenever they want. So it's a free interaction. Over here, the single interaction is kind of like a mouse. Only one person can interact with everything, everybody tells him what to do. Right? Divided interaction is a new one. I can, through this system, say, John can manipulate only all the quadrilaterals, and Jack can only touch the triangles. And if you try to touch the other one, it doesn't work. I can make I can give them superpowers. You know, Jenny has a power of rotation, and Jane has a power of translation. And somebody else has power of flipping, and they must collaborate to solve a problem. Therefore, thinking about this geometric rules and interactions. What we did is we built TAMU, a downward-looking camera tracking physical objects as they are being moved, so that you can actually replace them with the graphical shadows. So, a smooth transition between the physical and the virtual. Now you can move the things virtually, and you can control them by parameters. I'll just show you a video of this thing. We actually had this thing submitted to the Disney Learning Challenge and made finalists. And we had this thing presented there. So this is a video we sent.
TANTAB is a graphical tabletop system that uses tangram pieces to support visual expression and geometric imagination. Designed for children, it features 3 modes to support intuitive problem solving and better understanding of underlying geometry. In physical mode, TANTAB tracks objects and presents them as graphical shadows. In virtual mode, graphical shadows become solid graphic objects that can be directly manipulated. In magic mode, control proxies are used to manipulate the virtual shapes. This mode is magic because children can control an internal state not normally accessible in the real world. TANTAB also encourages social interaction. TANTAB leverages understandings of how children learn to scaffold transitions between intuitive, tangible problem solving and formal parametric conceptualizations. Overall, TANTAB is fun, combining imagination of form with geometric explorations.
Okay, so that's how the system works. The whole system works without you having to touch a keyboard. Everything is controlled by those proxies. You put another proxy on the table, the system recognizes it and switches mode into virtual mode and parametric mode. So, the technology addresses the trade-off between virtual and physical manipulatives to solve the problem of the gap between the two. It has 3 levels of affordances: physical, intuitive reasoning, virtual, and parametric. For those of us who are into geometry learning, you will know about the Van Heely's hierarchy of geometric thinking. Okay? At level 0, which he calls the image level, the visual level, and then further up into levels 1 and 2, which you can think of as being manipulation of properties and then relations between objects. Calls this the abstract and analytical levels. Okay, and then there's a 4th level and a 5th level that takes you to college. But what we're going to do is to allow smooth transition across these levels. And with these tools, again, we can analyze the behavior of the students. We come out to our final theme, and that's embodied enactment. The first, this is about the use of virtual reality visualization books for learning. Okay, so this is a cave, this contractual way here that requires quite a bit of cost and technology to maintain. But this is in the Cornell School of Medicine, and they are using this to study anatomy. Well, this is kind of restricted only to universities and to institutions that can afford, this kind of technology. But what about classrooms? Well, we know 3D TVs are coming. You can now buy these things. They are now $2,000. They'll come down to $600 eventually. It could be the price that you can print anything in a classroom. In fact, in the UK, they're really trying this. But the problem is this. The one and joystick interaction that you saw is very good for hand-centered interaction if you have to move something around by hand. But it's really terrible when you have to navigate a large space. Look at all this really complex navigation. In fact, the number of people who use this get motion sickness. Okay, you really don't want to have children puking in the classroom. Splitoon as being a part of teaching technology, right? And then also it provides a poor spatial sense, spatial knowledge acquisition about the larger space. One solution that people have proposed is walking in place, using the body, bringing it into the process, and so you have this natural interaction. And it's been proven to increase knowledge acquisition spatially, but it introduces fatigue and it's a pain to install. Okay. So can we get the best of both worlds? Walking and the joystick. This also wasn't presented the last time I was here. Okay. Students also just finished the PhD. So we propose, don't laugh yet, finger walking in place. Instead of walking with the whole body, you walk with the fingers on the touch tablet. And you can do anything you can do with walking, you can do with finger walking, in fact, more fluidly. So why would you expect this to work? Well, we go to rehabilitation science, and there's a theory that's known as motor equivalence theory. That's how all rehabilitation works. It says that action can be transferred from one body part to another and maintain intact the majority of the neural program. The neural program of writing, which is very complex, is maintained even when you train the person to switch body parts to the other hand or even to the right foot. Psychology also tells us that perception is active. That when you have an active program, you also activate an analytic perceptual capability. That's how VR works in the first place. If there was not this coupling, VR would fail. Okay? Right. Virtual reality, sorry. Now, if you take an original body part, original action walking, replace it with finger walking, the theory is that you activate the majority of the neural program, motor program. The question is there any allied perceptual gains that you can get from this? To do this, we went through a series of studies. The first is route and survey knowledge. Route knowledge is the ability to remember a route after going through a maze. And survey knowledge is after being through a big maze for a while, whether you can determine where the exit entrance is and where the true north is. Basically spatial ability and spatial sense. And people use this to study spatial ability. We did this. We found that finger walking and walking in place both outperformed the joystick significantly, and there was no appreciable difference between the two. The two function exactly. Sometimes finger walking in place outperformed the other, and vice versa. In fact, nobody had motion sickness in our 72 subjects using finger walking in place. We had 12 dropouts using joystick. They just threw up, I believe. Okay, and 2 dropped out of the walking in place for some reason. Okay, right. So for spatial memory and sense, we showed that finger walking in place had all the benefits of WIP without any of the drawbacks. Right. What about perception? We designed a space, we designed a virtual table like this, where we put molecules on the table, and you can walk around the table using either your body, using a joystick, or walking in place. And you're supposed to determine after the fact which of the 3 of the same size. Actually, they're quite complex objects. If you see this, quite difficult problems. Which of these are the same shape, angles of molecular structure, and finally, which have the same distance between the yellow balls, okay, in the space. So that's what we did. Each person did 8 of these tasks, and we therefore was able to correlate. Interestingly, there was no advantage in size perception. There was no advantage in shape perception. There was really significant advantage in distance perception. You can actually understand, we didn't predict this, by the way. After the facts, we went and looked at the theory. Gibson's ecological psychology would have predicted this. And we just were too dense to see that at first. You see, Gibson says action is for perception, right? If I were to manipulate something this small, local manipulation and stereo is the best for shape and size. But there's no need for me to know where your nose is, what the shape of your nose is over there. I need to be able to know if I want to throw something at you, how far you are. Or if I have to jump a chasm, I need to know how far the thing is. So in terms of full body movement, working in a large space, you would expect distance perception to have gains, allied gains, but not shape and size. For shape and size, you go back to manipulating the thing to the one. In fact, if there's somebody out there who wants to start a research trajectory with this on ecological psychology or research literature, no one actually had looked at this before. Okay, it's a new discovery, and the serendipitous discovery that we had trying to figure out whether or not finger walking in place would work. Okay. So what have we shown? We showed that this thing had the convenience of joysticks, in fact more convenient because everybody has a smartphone now, almost. Right? You can have your own app and walk up to any shared display and interact with it. Or 1 person or more. The effectiveness of WIP for spatial knowledge acquisition in larger spaces without any of its drawbacks. This therefore promises the application of bringing this kind of technology into classrooms, into homes, into learning spaces, in library walls, studios, and so on. Okay. We'd like to take this thing further into learning scenarios with VR and 3D. Okay. That will be where we'll take this thing next. And finally, nurturing creativity to micro-enactment. We want to begin this with the premise that we are, as human embodied humans, cultural beings. We are neither faster, nor do we fly, nor do we have claws, but we have come to dominate this world because we have culture. We are able to do multi-generational advancement and shape our space. If we are cultural beings, then there must be a way to enter information into our culture. And that every single thing, from the table you're sitting on, the chair you're sitting on, the projection screen, all these are the result of some previous human creativity. So rather than think of creativity as an accident of individuals, I want to think of creativity as a necessary piece of our species. And that the nurture of creativity as being a very important piece of education and learning. Vygotsky says this, by the way. A lot of our theories are based upon Lev Vygotsky's ideas. He's my patron saint. So creativity is the way by which we return to our culture and advance it. and speaking is porn. Well, this gives us a problem. Paul Torrance observed something he calls a fourth grade slump. He described it thus. It's a precipitous decrement in all creative thinking abilities near the end of the third grade and the beginning of the fourth grade. What happens is that from the point of speech, you see increasing creative activity until this point of everything falls into a hole. Right? Interestingly, as I was reading about this, I found that this thing falls exactly on top of the concrete operational phase. One of the key aspects of the concrete operational phase by Piaget is the igniting of social awareness. Now, this is what I think is happening. That before you feel the ability to contribute to something, you must feel that you're competent in it. And if you don't, you have the natural mechanism to learn not to speak out of turn. Unfortunately, in modern industrialized society, most children cross the level of competence way beyond the point of social awareness. When this happens, you have a problem. The child judges their contribution to be meager, therefore leading to demotivation, therefore leading to less exercise of the process of creativity, not the substance with which you create. The process of creativity itself is now being damaged. When this happens, there's less interest in creating, and then the down spiral happens. All engineers see this as a positive feedback cycle. And that's when you see a little curve going down, and then you know that's what's happening. So how can we help? We observe that children are in a media generation. And then maybe storytelling in media may be more native to the child's thinking and may lower the bar for creativity, and therefore short-circuiting that demotivation cycle. So we began a series of studies on this. We just got a little paper accepted with very good reviews at Creativity and Cognition. Okay, brand new paper. So, we conducted a series of studies, the first of which is to compare authoring in a text-based PowerPoint storybook template versus a media-based stop-motion storytelling with voice input. I'll just tell you what the results are. We found 6 major themes. I'll just talk about 3 of them. The first is micro-activities. We found that when children create using media, the process of creativity itself changes from text. In text, the creativity is very linear. The children get together, brainstorm, create the ideas, and then go to an encoding phase. Encoding, they write the thing out, they evaluate the outcome, then they go back and say, okay, what do we do next? And then again, this big chunk moves forward each time. With micro-enactment, with what you call the media, they engage in more micro-activities. They move the story forward a scene piece at a time, an animation at a time. At the same time, keeping common ground as to where they are going. Much, much smaller cycles of feedback and visualization. The activity was all activity-driven. Creating of sounds, placement of objects, movement of things, but they move the story forward that way. We found that the stories are far more textured, by the way, than the written stories. There was a lot more detail about what these things were. More importantly, we found that embodied enactment, even though they were just making this thing virtually, embodied enactment was evident in the media case, but not in the text case. In the media case, the children will stand up and say, no, they should be doing this. That was never seen in the text case. It was all about writing symbols. The body was brought into the purpose of thinking and creation. Oops. That was broader imagination. This is a test that I developed for this. If you ask the child for information about the story world beyond what was encoded in their work product, when you ask the child who created this thing in media, they can tell you more about the characters and more about that world. This is Peter Jackson doing Middle Earth. You can ask him more about Middle Earth than he actually put into the picture because he thought about it. He reflected on it. In the text case, they could not tell you anything beyond what was on the page. When we tested the children for the memory of the stories, the children who edited using the media approach could remember their stories in exquisite detail days after. The text-based people could not remember the stories even half a day after. It was just an assignment that they wrote and left. So we asked, what about physical interaction? And this is brand new again. Okay, this is the new paper that we have. We designed a bunch of cultural objects. These things involve visual similarity to the target objects they're simulating. Kind of like the stuff now you buy in Toys R Us. Everything is You know, the He-Man sword is down to the exact detail of what this thing looks like, the lightsaber and so on. So that's what the cultural objects are. Physical objects bear physical resemblance, kind of like the hobby horses and the stick that's used as a sword from days past. And arbitrary objects, think of this as we objects that could be anything you want it to be. Okay. We constructed a story that involved enactments using these objects in certain episodes, and certain episodes were just glued to put the story together. Okay. It's a story of 3 dwarfs saving their world from an invader. And they had these 3 things that they carried through the caves looking for a solution. We videotaped the data and analyzed it. We had the children draw pictures of their enactments. We also interviewed the students as to their stories and their enactments. And we developed a micro-analysis approach called Overall Broader Imagination Score, or OBIS, that evaluated not the outcome. There's a lot like Emma Bill's the conceptual assessment approach are outcomes. But children's outcomes are not all that great. We want the process. And so we looked at the kind of vignettes that they were constructing in real time through video analysis. Outcome was this, that we found a significant object by object type, whether cultural or physical, and gender difference. Okay. For females, we found an order that was physical, arbitrary, cultural, as a pattern that supported better imagination. For males, it seems the arbitrary object gives them greater flexibility to imagine, and it beat out the physical. In all cases, the cultural object, the He-Man sword that you buy at Toys R Us came in last. We believe the reason is because that object over-specified through its cultural significance what you can do with it. And therefore it limits creativity. Maybe we should go back to hobby horses and sticks between your legs. Okay. In fact, this confirms some creativity studies suggest the same thing about creating ambiguity as a means for supporting creativity.
So more attributes would, the more attributes then would limit creativity?
Yes. When you tell the child what exactly this thing is, it's a lightsaber, all you can do is swing. Okay? But if this thing, so this thing is look like ping pong paddle. The moment I made all these things in my workshop, by the way, including cultural objects, we made them to be similar to some graphical objects that we have, so that we can animate them. That's our next study, to actually move these things and in the track space and have the child interact, seeing the tracked object while they are moving this, kind of like the Wii. Yes.
I would have a counter argument, which is that a sign of creativity would be somebody being able to make use of an over-specified object in different ways. So if you talk to Steve Smith in psychology, one of the things that he does is he asks you name all possible uses of a paperclip. And so the paperclip is over-specified. It's a very, very specific object that serves a particular purpose. But so you're asking the individual to move away from the constraints.
Yes.
So that's the opposite of what
you're right, but the reason they use it as a test is because it's difficult. We are not talking about children. We're talking about 8-year-olds. Okay? Right? We're not talking about adults. For the adults, you want them to develop to the point where they can think about repurposing cultural things. We do that all the time. I mean, every engineer knows that the purpose of engineering is to use a tool for which it is not designed. Right? That's the definition of engineering. You know, thinking about different cake mix, thinking about making do with a tool. But that comes later. We want to encourage that kind of thinking to get to that point. And what we are talking about, what kind of things can we help with children? With children, we find that this barrier, this precise reason for the test, is to provide the ability to take something, destroy its cultural significance, and reconstruct it in a new form.
Well, what you've done, though, that 4th grade slump that you were talking about,
yes.
If creativity is related to one's ability to use language in a written manner,
yes.
Many children at 4th grade don't have the reading capabilities to do that.
That's right.
But they have the experiential language capabilities to do that.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want. You see, I'm not saying we stop other education. I'm saying, as Vygotsky does, that there are 2 components to creativity, and that learning is actually a creative process. You need the substance with which to create. You need the process of creativity. When children are practicing all kinds of creative action, they are not creating. There are very few Mozarts at 7 years old, but they are all practicing the process, waiting for the point of time where substance catches up so that they can apply the process and substance at the same time. Play, a tiger cub practices the kill, not because it's trying to kill its siblings, otherwise we have very few tigers around, right? But they are practicing the process in advance to the ability to actually kill. We need to think about education as and teaching creativity as process and substance. That's what we are trying to get at here. Can I nurture the process to one section of learning, while at the same time continuing with math and science? I'm not saying stop that.
But then how do you meld that with enhanced reading capabilities to move beyond just manipulative, concrete? Because reading frees the mind from direct experiences.
That's right. That's beautiful. I agree fully with that. Okay, I love words. I write poetry. Okay, I've been doing that ever since I was 11. Words are wonderful. What I'm talking about is how do you scaffold, how do you move the child from one to the other, and that's where our findings can meld with educational strategies in this process. But without understanding this, then we don't know what we're trying to meld. Okay. I agree that's where you want them to go. Bruner's it was Bruner. Bruner's hierarchy that takes you from enactment to visuality to symbol. But unlike Piaget, Bruner says that the process of enactment and visualization always comes to play even as you grow up. It's not as you grow old, when I became a man, childish things I put aside. We still use the same strategies. The question is, how do we nurture the use of those strategies? I mean, an artist, if you go in the artist space, the creative space in design and architecture, you put all kinds of stuff into the space to trigger imagination. That's what Smith and Android were doing with their visualization for creative support, to provide enough visual content to trigger recombination, because creativity is combinatorial in one model of creativity. So what we are trying to say here, and I agree with you, we want to move to the symbol stage. But to get you there, we have to encourage this sense of creative ambiguity. And that's why children play. That's why we encourage children to play. Play is not just play. Play is learning how to create in the real world. I mean, Vygotsky says that. Piaget says that. Right? Tappert says that. Right? So that's what we are trying to do here, is not to obviate the need for symbol, but to figure out how to get you from enactment to symbol through a smooth process that does not require that you jolly well know the symbol before you start writing, otherwise you're not good enough. Okay, that's what we're going to try to avoid. But eventually we want to be able to take them through this story, and perhaps the next step is to do one of these things and then say, now write out what you just made.
And see how the relationship between what they write relates to what they created.
Yes.
Because
I want to write a cyber learning proposal on that.
But you would need to have some kind of electronic support to help the child who could get the words, even though he doesn't know how to write them, doesn't know how to spell them, doesn't know how to say them. But I want to use reciprocal. I don't know how to write it, or how to. So there's got to be a voice recognition component in there. If you're going to, this is my thought, if you're going to take that creative component and make it a written component and be able to analyze it and expand upon it, change it, adapt it, abstract it, whatever.
Yes. But don't forget that you have the human component, you have the teacher in place. I'm not about using technology to replace the teacher. I mean, the technology is like paper in the ecology. We never say, now we have paper so we can dump the teachers. I hope not. Okay? Right? We now have to say, if you have these strategies in place and this technology as support in place, how do you have better effective use in a learning space? How do you create a better ZPD, for example? I mean, and those are open questions. I would love to explore those. You know, I'm just a dumb engineer building things, right? Right. And I'm trying to understand how these things work. I go a little further than most engineers do, thinking about these things. But you can see a lot of my work involves understanding the problem, you know, thinking about a solution, figure out a new test to figure out whether this thing is worth anything or not, right? And then moving forward with it. Okay. So this is the final one. This answers some of the questions. We asked the question, okay, enactment is good. How does it affect the way they tell the story linguistically after the fact? So we looked at story quality told after the fact. We found that there was a significant correlation between the episodes enacted versus the episodes that were not enacted. Because enactment causes reflection, reflection causes contemplation, contemplation causes a better story to be told, right? But is enactment all there is? Answer is no. It's mediated through imagination. Remember we had the OB scores earlier? So we took the OB scores and we correlated against storytelling. We found that enactment mediated by creativity or imagination at the point of enactment impacts. So if the imagination scores were high, it correlated very, very well with story content. If the imagination level that we coded was low, this also proves our OB scores was low, the story's content was also poor.
That supports dual coding theory.
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, you see a lot of connections here, right? So, what have we done here? We have developed technology that shows, we have studied that shows the affordance of media-based virtual interfaces that creates tighter, faster cycles for micro units of creation. We saw the prevalence of body-based enactment. We saw broader imagination. We saw the affordance of physical objects, but only as they are mediated through imagination down there. And we saw how culturally charged objects actually might be a problem. Okay. So we come to the end. I have talked about theory, the theory of embodiment, that actually informs other theories of creativity and so on. Right? We have seen cyber learning. Basically, informed by those theories, I have taken this one step beyond imaginatively to try to see how I can use this for special education, for the use of physicality in physical spaces and in learning of particular mathematical concepts. We have seen how body enactment can inform different technologies that might make it easy for us to implement them in classrooms. And we have also seen how we can nurture creativity through enactment. Collaboration. I keep telling people I'm just a dumb engineer. The reason I know this much is because over the years I've worked with a lot of people and I absorb very quickly. I'm a sponge. And I read a lot. Okay? And because of that, we can take this thing across very broad collaborations. I have worked with neurologists, psychologists, learning theorists, anthropologists, communication scientists, and so on. Right. But it's important because cyber learning is a very interdisciplinary field. You cannot attack it without going interdisciplinary. Okay. So thank you. Those are all our support. I know I ran a little over time, but I got a little excited and ended with questions. I can't leave the questions sitting on the table.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
You mentioned one funding agency all along the way, and that was NSF. You're so very multidisciplinary. What are the various funding agencies that help you, that are interested in your work? I'm just curious. Is it primarily NSF?
Primarily, I've been an NSF animal. When you're successful, I mean, I've gotten about $17 million in my lifetime, $10 million over the last 10 years. You keep going back to the same well because you've been successful. And I didn't need to do much more. Yeah, I didn't need to do much more. But I'd be interested to explore other sources. Okay, and I would love to have a foundation. I'd love to have the Gates Foundation fund this kind of work.
Yes.
If you can get them to do it.
Yes.
I would like to take the blind work and create a foundation to, there's a very large body of blind students, blind people in Northern Africa. Because there's a waterborne disease, waterborne virus that makes people go blind.
Right, right.
Over here, our blindness rate is 1 in 1,000. In India, it's 8 in 1,000. In Brazil, it's 3 in 1,000. It's actually quite large in other places. Okay. So there is a fantastic chance for outreach
Yeah, this is Gates' work, I think, you know.
Yeah, so if anyone has his personal Rolodex telephone, I'd be glad to give this presentation to him. So I'd be really interested to explore other things. The military, as I said, has talked to us. Okay, I've been funded by I've got other research. So for example, I have actually taken my meeting analysis, and the and the Intel people were interested to know if we have a videotape of a group of people in turbans discussing a plan, who is the top dog, and what is the social dynamics.
Does the Department of Education have any interest in you?
I have not fished there.
I just wondered.
I've not fished there. I would love to. Okay, I'd love to. I've done NIH.
NIH?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah, thanks.
So, but that's my medical research angle. I'm quite broad for a skinny guy. I'm sorry. I thought I get into this creative mode where everything goes.
I have another quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned gender at one point, so there was a point in some of your research where you had reason to suspect that gender differences might make a difference in the end of the results of your study. What about ethnicity or culture? When you began to talk about gesturing, I naively was thinking about Italians or certain cultures that gesture more than others, and I just wondered if the culture from which someone comes turns out to have an effect on their effectiveness or of communicating or teaching or so on.
Okay, I'll just give you a couple of anecdotes. You are hitting something I really love. Aslı Öztürk from Turkey was looking at second language learners. TAMU calls English an S-type, a V-type language, whereas the Turkish is an S-type language. Basically, it's a question of where you place the marking of manner in the language. English is a manner-rich language. We can walk there, roll there, hop there, jump there. There's no way for us to express a verb without going completely neutral and say go there. There are only very few verbs that are not manner-marked. But TAMU tells us that emotion description is multidimensional. You have path, ground, manner, distance, direction, and so on. Turkish marks direction, going away, going towards. As I don't know Turkish, but that's what I was told. Okay. So a Turkish student learning English, instead of saying I swing there, will say I go there swinging. Okay, go there being the linguistic unit. I mean there's a lot of sapient war here, right? For those who are into the language theory. And then at first they will say I go there swinging. At some point they will say I swing there, but the gesture is in the wrong place because they're thinking in Turkish, translating to English. Later, the gesture and the speech melts together, and they begin to say, I swing there. That's the point where language combines. So, in a sense, you know that language, thinking for speaking, is a very large part, if indeed gesture reveals thought, that you have that kind of connection between the gesture and the speech. Right. So, there is a lot of interest in studying this. Unfortunately, I live in white Appalachia, in Blacksburg, where we don't have a lot of racial mix. Very, very white area. And even our poor people are white over there. So. Okay. I'm sorry, it's just a joke about Appalachia. That's true. I mean, we have got a lot of very poor white folk that never leave the place.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting population.
Yeah, it's an interesting population. But it'd be interesting to look at ethnic differences and especially linguistic differences that change. So here's one. They have been observed in mathematics instruction in Taiwanese. Some people observed in Taiwanese, and in Taiwanese, in English you will say 10% of the number, or 10% of the number. And 10% is a very linguistic model that's very hard on cognition for teaching. In Chinese, you don't say 10% of 100. You say of 100, take 10. Okay? right? Or you know, 100是10分, 10分, you know, 10 parts of 100. And so the gesture would be, the teacher when they're performing this will say, you know, 10 parts of 100, right? As opposed to the English where the flow of thinking is inverted. Right? And these people came and say, "Oh, the Chinese teachers are much better in conveying the thinking." And I say, "That's because that's how the language works."
That's interesting. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
So there are some really interesting things. What's the name now? Martha Alibali at University of Wisconsin is looking at how gestures reveal the zone of proximal ZPD, of the zone of proximal development. So she noticed that children who are doing mathematics, arithmetic, simple arithmetic, will gesture. Okay. So if you have a plus sign or minus sign, and the children will begin by adding them instead. So this plus this. But later, they will say this plus this. There's a point where there is cognitive dissonance between their understanding of the symbol and their process that they are performing, because they still cannot subtract. But that's the point where they begin to see the subtraction, right? And at that point, if you knew that was happening, you could then apply added effort to push them over the hump, because they are close enough to be able to address. Now, that's not my work. That is work I.
It's called cognitive confusion.
Yes.
And it is. I mean,
it's a point of cognitive dissonance, basically.
Right.
Right. But it's that point of confusion that is important for learning. And so there's a lot of work, and that's why the foundation of my work that's why I started with language. I do a lot of my work analyzing language, analyzing the language to understand what's actually going on at the point of learning or instruction.
Let's go eat and we can talk while we eat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Robert, the food out there.
Tim, Kathy Loving.
Hi, Kathy.
My grandson Jack House will be in your class this summer. He's
food in the room
he's
next door.
I just got the paperwork for the,
So all of
biz
you might come in.
animation.
Yeah, great.
So he's
Jack
House.
So his brothers and sister, doesn't he have, or is they here in town?
Well, he has 3 younger brothers and sisters.
Right.
Yeah,
And they live around Cameron, is their mother?
You know Cameron?
Yeah, we were at St. Michael's.
Well, of course. Yeah, Cameron is his mother.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So Jack's gonna be in?
Yeah, he's a computer game nerd.
Right.
In fact, I took him to that big musical in Austin, virtual. Yeah, it's a big musical that's been going around for 9 years or so. For anybody who's into virtual games, and it's a wonderful, the Austin Symphony performed, and these people come in, and they go over all the games, from the old ones to the new ones, and they're performing the music from those games. So I took 2 of them.
I haven't even heard of them.
Really? I'll have to send the information to you.
Yeah, I'd like to hear.
It comes to Austin almost every year, and I've met a woman who's been to 3 performances, and she said they're each different. You know, they managed to. Yeah, it's very. So anyway.
Glad Jack will be there, that'll be
Yeah,
fun.
he will. Thank
So
you.
he'll be going into 8?
Yeah, he's going into 8.
Okay.
So he was trying to get into the 8 to 10, but that was full.
Oh, was it already?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was
Okay.
full.
Yeah, I haven't
And
kept
so
up.
there was room in the 6 to 8, so
Right.
he'll.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Yeah,
That'll be good.
so. Great.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Your name again?
Kathy Loving.
Kathy Loving.
I'm
We've met-
paying
we've
for
been
it.
in-
I'm the grandma, yeah. Well, I'm the
One of these
associate
meetings.
department head in TLAC.
Yeah.
So we have met.
Right.
It may be the parent species
This was
from
something
which
else.
something.
Yeah, no, very
Amazing.
Yeah.
So it has
stuff.
one
Really,
meaning.
really.
The kids
Yeah.
oftentimes.
My son
understand
Charlie
that. So if
is in David's
you could
class.
someone.
Oh, he
Yeah,
is,
they
yeah.
were good friends, and then. We
So your
moved
son
over
is
to
still at
Joseph's.
St. Michael's?
No, we moved over to St. Joseph's.
Okay.
Same time that.
We moved.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, mine are all in public school now. They're
Yeah.
doing fine, they're doing fine.
Yeah. I
So.
miss
Are
St.
you happy
Michael's.
with St. Joseph's?
It's all right.
Uh-huh.
You know, St. Michael's is a better learning environment.
Yes.
If they could just
Yeah.
keep their house in order.
I know.
It just got too frustrating to try to figure out
always
where
been
we were
that
jumping
way.
next.
At one time Cameron
And we-
was on
I'm
board
committed
and she got off that. Yeah.
Mhm.
She taught there for a while too. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
I-
Food
I-
next door. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to do something. Different, I guess.
Yeah.
I got your,
Great.
I like that PowerPoint.
I hadn't made that connection before, guys.
Tamisha, will that video be available if I want to let my son